Hello and welcome to Tell Muses, a podcast for storytellers, with storytellers, done by storytellers. And this is for everyone interested in stories and storytelling every time we change the introduction because we cannot remember it. But, well, you love us for this. So, I'm Simona and I'm here with my lovely co-host Despina, and today our muse is the wonderful Keith Rogers. Hello Keith, and thank you for being here with us.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, Keith. So Keith is joining us from Wolverhampton, UK. Right, Keith?
That's
Where
right.
you are now? Yeah, good. Okay, so we begin these interviews by the same question over and over again because it's really an open kind of question, and the storyteller can take it any way they please. So Keith, would you please tell us a few things about who Keith Rogers is?
Well, Keith Rogers is a former primary school head teacher, and I spent 20 years of my career in London, and then we moved as a family to Wolverhampton. The storytelling has gone on as you would expect with young children forever. Reading from books and telling stories. When I became a head and I was doing a couple of assemblies a week, I was more comfortable telling the story rather than reading it from a book. And this used to amuse the children. A 5-year-old once said to me, "You read stories in assembly without looking at the book." And I can imagine him sitting there cross-legged in the front, wondering while I walked up and down how I wasn't looking at the book. So my background in storytelling was fairly firm before I began. When I retired in 2010, we go away with a group of friends, and they play music, sing songs, and ceilidh dancing. And we were at Whitby Folk Festival, and there is an area at the bottom of the steps to the Abbey, and there was an impromptu music evening, people playing and singing. And my friends who I was sharing a house with had seen Dave Tong tell stories in the afternoon. And as he walked past, Nicole jumped up and asked him if he would come and tell a story, which of course he was delighted to do. And he came over and he told a story. And I was sitting there thinking, oh, I could do that. I could tell a story. And so when he had finished and a couple of songs and music had passed, I stood up and I said to the assembled company, "Do you want to hear a story?" And of course they did. And I told a story, and that was great. And at the end of the week, the couple I'm referring to bought me Dave Tong's Book of Tudor Tales. Now, the following autumn, we were away in Belgium on a cruise on the river, 4 cruisers, big crowd of us, about 30 people. And we finished with an evening of song and dance in the centre where the boats come back in. And I was approached if I would tell a story. Now, they hadn't experienced this really before, apart from the couple I referred to. And so halfway through the evening, it was my turn, and I stood up and told them a story. And Paul, our friend who was Whitby, said that, we've now completed the circle. For we sing, we dance, we play tunes, and now we tell stories. So whenever we're away with that group of friends and they have a musical evening, partway through the evening they will say, "Can you tell us a story?" But the big thing that happened to me was Lorna, my wife, as a surprise present for my birthday in October, bought me beginner's storytelling at Halsey Manor in Somerset with Sharon Jackstyes. And a group of us for 5 days were I'm just thinking how you describe it. We weren't taught how to tell stories. We could do that already, but it gave us a sharp focus on how stories were built and how you keep the pace going. And from that week, I came back and I contacted the Trad Arts team in Birmingham, run by Graham Langley, a famous storyteller, and Pam Bishop. Lorna reminded me that they do all sorts of things, but they do have a storytelling content. And it really started when I went to an evening of storytelling called Tales and Ales in a pub, and I told a story there. And Graham was there, and he invited me to his training sessions on a Sunday. Once a month, he would do a training session talking about the rhythm of the stories and how to best tell stories, how to not taper off at the end, all those things that we recognize now. And from that introduction, a troop of us began telling stories to adults on evening occasions, and then I became involved with the Birmingham Storytelling Cafe, which is a kitchen garden cafe in King's Heath in Birmingham. Once a month, there is a storytelling evening, and that was a really important part of my storytelling journey. Yes, Despina.
I'd like to ask first, that first course I bought for you for your birthday, was it like a retreat? I didn't get exactly what it
Yeah,
was.
yes, it was a residential course, and so we had the opportunity to have our meals together and so on, and socialize, if you like. Uh, and it was a really intense 5 days, and during the week we were expected to tell stories to the group, um, and also plan in pairs so we could discuss it, how to prepare a story.
And who was running the course?
Sharon Jackstyes, she's
Oh,
a
great.
storyteller based um, in Somerset. Does a lot of work. Uh, she's just been to Romania, I saw, and one of her courses I went on a couple later on. Some of the Romanian storytellers came on that course as well. We met them.
Is she still active? Do you know? Does she continue to do things like that?
Yes, yeah. I mean
Maybe
she's been to Romania recently.
I'm mentioning Graham, who is a dear friend of mine, and I really love him and Pam. He does not do storytelling any longer. He says he's got difficulty memorizing things now, so he's given it up. But he always keeps supporting storytelling in the area, the wider area of Birmingham. So he's into other artistic forms, but he always tries to encourage new storytellers. And I've been to his courses, Keith. I started attending his gymnasium during COVID, which was
Yeah.
online back then. And it was really, really helpful. Some of the memory techniques he would share with us, I still use nowadays. So, a question. How are you involved in storytelling nowadays? What projects are you into?
Well, at the moment, I'm working in some schools in the Midlands on would be described as training children for storytelling. So Lorna and I went to a school on Tuesday afternoon, and we had a year 5 class, which is 10-year-olds in England. Um, and we began by introducing ourselves, and then I sat on a chair and started to tell a story in a monotone. And Lorna stopped me after a few sentences and said to the children, well, how can we make that more interesting? And of course, the children knew. They knew that if you perhaps you could stand up and use your hands and change your voice. So I then told the story as I would normally, and so then they broke off into pairs and they told the story of the three little pigs. We decided to focus on a very familiar story, uh, and so in pairs they practiced that, and then 5 children stood up and told the rest of the children uh, the story of the three little pigs, and they were really expressive. They really understood. So that school and another school in Shropshire we were about to go into, and I've also working with the Montessori school in Marrakesh, which is online, with a similar thing. The Zoom thing is harder to assess its success because it you don't really get the feedback. The children are sitting there dutifully listening, but you don't quite get that feedback. The idea is, in a sense, to promote storytelling and also to train children, develop children, the next generation, if you like, of storytellers. So that's quite a big project. And that began in this year's International Festival in Marrakesh. When I did a session, we go into schools as part of the festival, and I I worked with the children from the international school, and of course the advantage is they can speak English because the Moroccan children, their second language is French, and when you go into high schools, they can probably speak English as well. But elementary schools, they don't tend to be able to. So that's the nature, and we're working towards probably in the spring, where the three schools come together online and the children tell each other stories. I'm still working once a month with the Birmingham Storytelling Cafe, and one of the interesting things in the journey has been the lockdown created Zoom storytelling, which is when I met you both, and we went to Litchfield Storytelling and Bag of Tales and Rona's headlining storytelling. And I can remember when Despina and I first met in Morocco, we had only ever seen each other from head and shoulders. So that was quite an interesting meeting, first of all. But we'd become friends already, hadn't we? We'd known each other for 2 years,
Absolutely.
and it was interesting in that sense. But so I still do that. Yeah, Tuesday evening, I attended the Zoom storytelling session of Bag of Tales run by Anthony Finn, who lives in Lancaster. Also, East Anglia Storytelling Festival, I've been part of for the last couple of years, and Mike Rust's spoken word evening once a month in Much Wenlock, and that's a nice evening because it's poets
Oh,
as well.
okay, thanks for the pass because we seem to be forgetting to mention that this season of Tell Muses podcast, season 2, is under Galway's wing, you see. So we need
Okay.
to promote Mike Russ's little warm and kind festival of the spoken word.
Oh, yeah. I was.
Simona's got a question for you, Keith.
Well, first of all, a comment, Keith, because well, Despina and I have never met in real life. I still have to check that she's got legs. I don't know. I saw her moving around, but I don't know. They could be fake or what I can see from here. I don't know. So that she's not an alien, that she really exists. We still have to meet in real life. But I completely get what you just said about Zoom because I had the same feeling and the same experience when after meeting online with people over and over and over, I met them, and my first reaction was, "Oh, you've got legs!" So yeah. And but I just wanted to ask you a question because you were talking about working in school now and the projects that you're doing now with schools. But at the beginning, you mentioned that you were a head teacher and you told stories to the students. So you also mentioned the difference between reading from a book and telling a story without reading. So I just wanted to ask you, what is your experience of the two, and why do you think maybe telling a story sometimes without the book is better? When do you think reading a story is better? What is your experience since you did both of them and you have experience in both of them?
Yeah. I think that reading from a book, the importance of reading from a book is you do it with fewer children. So, say a class full of children in a classroom, about 30 children and sitting and reading the book. And not only are you delivering the story that the author has written, but you're also promoting reading books is exciting and interesting. Whereas standing up and telling a story, your audience is engaged. And one of the pleasures of telling stories is to make eye contact and look around and see people looking back at you and listening carefully. And having a room, you will have experienced this, having a room listening to your every word. And that's one of the pleasures of storytelling, but it's the engagement, I think, which is it's quite a different experience. And uh, the the children are used to it because they're used to being read to from an early age. But even with my own children, when they were small, I read to them, but also I used to make up stories. We had these stories of this fox and badger. So there they are, tucked up in their beds, and fox and badger would have an adventure today, usually meaning going to McDonald's secretly or something like that. Um, but so even then, I like the imagination of making things up. And now they are grown and have their own children. Uh, they remember those things, uh, which is nice.
Yes, that's also my experience of the difference between reading a book and
Mm,
telling a story. And I have to confess that sometimes when I'm asked, for example, to read a story from a book, I tend to read and reread and reread the story over and over again before going to the meeting so that I can raise my eyes from the book and continue reciting the story because I know the story by heart, and I can show the pictures, maybe help with the engagement with the pictures, but look at the audience. That's something that I I completely agree with.
yeah, that's right. I mean, it's the engagement is the key, and I've done the same thing when I've read over and over again, so I can look up from the book from time to time,
I
and
think this is a shared experience among all storytellers. This is why we prefer telling that rather than reading.
oh
But
yes,
speaking of stories, Keith, do you think we might get to listen to one of your stories now?
yes, and I will tell you the story that I told at Whitby as my first storytelling experience, and it was a story I knew from reading it to children at school, and I could remember it. So I stood
Perfect.
up and I told a story from Finland, and it's the story of Pika and Kiliki. This was a time when people did not travel, back in distant time, and it had been a very dry summer. And Pika's mother called him into the kitchen and said, "We do not have enough food to feed our old cow Kaliki through the winter. You will have to take her to market and sell her." And so the next morning, with his broad-brimmed hat and his neckerchief against the sun and a rope around Kaliki's neck, he set off with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, for he had never been to the town before. And this was so exciting, but a bit scary too. And he walked in the heat of the sun, and as he crested a hill, he looked down, and there was a small river with a bridge over it, and a copse of trees to the right. And as he walked down, he could see the town spread out beyond the river. But what he didn't see was three rascals in the woods, watching him walk down the hill. And as he came toward the bridge, one of the rascals walked past him, swaggering, and said, "Hello, Hayseed. That's a nice goat you've got there," and walked on. He tried to say it's a cow, it walked on. And then leaning against the parapet of the bridge was another rascal, and he said, "Oh, That looks a fine goat you've got there. You get a decent price for that in the market. He said, it's a cow. He said, you sure? You sure? I mean, you're a country boy, I know that, but it looks a nice looking goat to me. Pika was totally confused now. And as he walked by the copse, the third rascal walked out and offered him the price of a goat for his old cow, Kaliki. And he was so confused that he agreed. And to him, who had lived a country life and not dealt in money, it did look like a princely sum. And he watched as the rascal led Kaliki away. So he walked through the town, all the hustle and bustle and the shops and the cafes, and he was intrigued by this such a different experience from his own isolated farm. But when he got to the cattle market, he watched as the three rascals sold Kaliki for 4 times the amount that they had given him, and he realized he'd been tricked, and he was furious, and he decided to do something about it. And he marched back down the street, and he went into a pie shop, a cafe with seats outside. And he said, I've got some friends coming down with me. I'd like to pay for 4 pies now. But as for a bit of a fun, when the waiter comes up to pay, I'll spin my hat and say, is everything paid for? The waiter said, fine, odd, but fine. Then he went down a bit further, and there's a big, like a cheesecake, it's called a torque, with blueberries on top. And he spoke to the waiter and said, I'd like to pay for 4 slices of that. But when my friends come, just a bit of a joke, when you ask for the payment, I'm going to spin my hat and say, is everything paid for? And he said, well, you paid for it. And then he did the same thing at a place that sold ice creams. Then he set off for the market, and he saw the 3 rascals walking towards him, and they tensed a little as they realized he had noticed their trick. But he marched up like a friend and said, chaps, that was a good price you gave me. And I'm a bit hungry now. I don't want to eat on my own. Would you like to join me for a pie? And they looked at each other and thought, yeah, this really is a dumb hayseed, isn't it? Not only have we tricked him, he's going to buy us a pie. And they sat down, they ate their pies, and the waiter came over. And Pika said, spun his hat on his finger and said, is everything paid for? And the waiter said, yes. Swept their plates away. And the rascals looked at each other. But before they could speak, he said, oh, I tell you what, I saw a really nice torque down the road. Let's go and have some of that. So they went to the shop with the torque, and they sat down, they got a slice each, and they ate them. As the waiter came up to clear the plates, Pika stood up and spun his hat and said, is everything paid for? And the waiter said, yes. And he took the plates away. And they said, this hat, what's this hat? What's going on? You haven't produced any money. And he said, oh, it's my grandfather's hat. It's a magic hat, and it's a country thing because we don't go to the town very often. So if you spin your hat and say, is everything paid for? Poof, there you are. How splendid is that? And they said, well, will you sell us that? He said, oh, I couldn't sell it. Because it's my grandfather's hat. I tell you what, though, I fancy an ice cream. Let's go and have some ice cream. And they went and got 4 pots of ice cream. And they sat and tucked in. But now the rascals were very keen on this hat, and they were pressurizing him to sell the hat. And he eventually said, oh, well, all right. But I don't know, it's worth a lot. And they took all the money they had, including the money they got for Kaliki, their own money, rings and bracelets, and they put it all on a table. And Pika took off his neckerchief and put all the money and the bracelets and the neckerchief. And he closed it up and he said, well, okay, because you've been decent to me. I'll sell you the hat. And he handed it over and he set off to go back home. The rascals went into a restaurant. They went into a restaurant and they ordered a feast. Oh, feast. Plate after plate of food, desserts you would dream of. They ate and they ate till they could eat no more, and the waiter arrived with a huge long list. And the first rascal spun the hat on his finger and said, "Is everything paid for?" And the waiter said, "What?" And the second one grabbed it off him, looking a little nervous, and said, "Is everything paid for?" "Are you making fun of me?" said the Ray. The third one, now in a panic, is waving the hat furiously, shouting, "Is everything paid for? Is everything paid for?" The waiter called two burly men from the kitchen, who took them by the collar, for they had no money left in their pockets, and took them into the kitchen, where they began to wash up, where they stayed till the early hours of the morning. Meanwhile, Pika has arrived home, and he walks into the kitchen, and his mother is sitting there, and the kettle's on the hob, and he puts his neckerchief down and opens it out, and his mother looks at all his money and the rings and the bracelets and says, "Pika, you didn't get all that money for our old cow Kaliki?" And he says, "No, I sold my hat as well."
Wonderful story. Brilliant. Loved it. I love it when in stories there are people who get fooled by someone, but then they get their revenge.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I normally like kids' stories so much. I even tell some of them. That's like the highest praise I can give to a storyteller.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it's nice to hear. It's nice to hear.
Yeah,
Stories should go around all storytellers
absolutely.
and spread around the world. I mean, it's
Do
not
you
my
remember?
story. I got it from a book, first of all.
Do you
Um,
remember the one about the merchant who lost his purse in the market?
oh, yes, yes, the Tudor
So,
tale. Yes,
yeah, you found it in Dave Tong's book, didn't
that's
you?
right.
Right, and I heard it from you in a version like a medieval kind of tale. The atmosphere was like that.
Yes,
But when we were in Marrakesh, Simona, I told this story in the school. I was with Liz Weir in the school, and I told this story. And while I was telling the story, the Quran teacher interrupted me and said, "Excuse me, but this is an Arab story. Can I please tell the ending to the students?" And I said, "Yes, of course you can, of course you can." So you see, you can find it as a Tudor tale or you can find it as an Arab tale, and you never know where it first began and how it got transported from one culture to the other, and how it got a new version in the new surroundings it found itself. This is wonderful. This is what happens with stories. So Keith, I hear you're doing some work with Mike Rust. What exactly has he had you do for him?
well,
Is it the school work you were mentioning, is it?
that's right. Mike and I have known each other for a long time, and when he began his festival, the Get a Word in Edgeways festival, uh, I became part of that, and he wanted us to expand the ethos of the festival. So I suggested working in schools, and the plan is perhaps next October to bring some of the children who have been learning how to tell stories into the festival to tell their stories to an audience. Um, so it's an outreach. Also, he's very keen on identifying the diversity. So the Wolverhampton population is a very diverse one, whereas some of the rural places are not as diverse. The school I was discussing with the head teacher the other day is in quite a remote place, and there are only two classes. So you have lots of different ages of children in the same class. Uh, but that's Mike's plan. Uh, it's also linked to the International Storytelling Festival in Marrakesh. So I've been there twice now. The first time I went there, it was because Despina sent me an email saying John Rowe is looking for storytellers for the International Festival in Marrakesh. Do you want to come? That's changed quite a lot of my life coming to Marrakesh, and it it's a fact that it's not just the storytelling, which is brilliant in the World Storytelling Cafe and the wonderful marquee in the square, but it's also meeting all those storytellers from all around the world, and that has been a fantastic experience. Um, and then I go to another festival like East Anglia Storytelling Festival, and several of those storytellers are there too. And it becomes you feel you're a part of this community of storytellers, and I think that's a big thing as well. So I've been very lucky because I'm retired. I have the time to do these things, which is both which is fortunate, but nonetheless, it's been a great experience. Because so yeah, Despina, you couldn't come last year, could you? Because you were busy working.
A tiny
The dates didn't
correction.
work for you. But
A
I
tiny,
couldn't come to the October Much Wenlock Festival because I was in Australia. My
yeah, I
son lives in
remember.
Perth, and we were in Australia playing with our grandchildren, basically,
That's awesome.
for
It was a
six
very
weeks.
good reason to miss
It,
the
it
Galway
certainly
Fest.
was. It certainly was.
Just a tiny correction there. When I introduced you to John Rowe in 2023, he was not looking for storytellers because John Rowe always has a bunch of storytellers willing
Oh
to do
right,
anything
okay.
for him, right? So he was just sending the word out that we're doing this. Would you like to get involved? And when I heard you two did not know each other, being a few kilometers away from each other, I found it incredible. And I thought, yeah, you must meet each other. You will love each other, I'm sure. And so you
Oh
did.
yeah, John is an amazing character, and one of
Yes.
the things that interests me about John is he remembers everybody. So he's
Yeah.
traveling the world telling stories, meeting storytellers, and then he would meet me next week, and he'd say, first, "Hello, Keith. How are you then?" And he remembers everyone,
He's an
and
elephant.
I mean, it's part of his charm, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
of
he's
course.
a larger than life character,
Yeah.
always grounded in he likes storytellers, and he
And he's
remembers
a really
everyone.
nice person, warm heart and everything. Yeah, he's what you'd expect to find in a storyteller. And as you said, we have this little lovely little community of ours. We keep recycling
Yes.
ourselves around the different festivals and making new friends as we go. That's lovely. So, Keith, what's happening storytelling wise nowadays in your part of the woods? Traditional tales is still on? Uh, no traditional tales,
The Trad Arts team is
traditional art.
yeah, I mean, Graham has. You're quite right. Graham has retired,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he's paid his dues really. The amount of work he's done for storytelling and other aspects of traditional arts over the years. Um, but the Birmingham Storytelling Cafe is still operating once a month, and I'm Mike's spoken word evening, as I've mentioned before, in Much Wenlock is once a month. So there are opportunities to tell stories, and there are also two or three Zoom sessions a month that you can log into uh, that give you a chance to tell stories. And it's two things really. One is so the story I've just told you, I'm very familiar with, and but also if you're doing a Zoom session, I think it gives you the space to try out new stories. If you've got a paying audience, they must be spot on, mustn't they? And you know all about them, you've got to deliver them well. I'm not saying you shouldn't deliver them well online, but there is that little space around it to test a new story and see if the ending works and those kind of things. So Zoom sessions, I really like for that, and I really like keep meeting people. Lichfield storytelling has a real international audience. So we have Despina in Greece, Karen in Sweden, Meta in Denmark, uh, Christine in America, and it has that real international flavour to it. So when lockdown finished, these things have carried on because they used to be in person, but clearly we don't travel all over the world for a storytelling evening. But they're good, aren't they, Despina? They're
Oh,
a
they're
real
excellent.
opportunity to tell stories. Well,
Um,
that is, these things have a life. If to keep them going, it needs new people to come in and refresh them, and also, I mean, with venues like the Storytelling Cafe, audience, the publicity and audiences. You found this when you were there. Sometimes you get a small audience. Sometimes we just had 20 odd people last Wednesday, um, and it was really nice. Filled that room, uh, but it is a bit hand to mouth,
yeah.
keeping it going. So it's we keep working at it, but because it's a really nice place to tell stories. I really like telling stories there.
It is. It is. I've told a story there, Simona, and we need more young people like Simona, Keith, and I'm sure at some point I'm going to manage to get her in the UK when I'm there as well. So we will
Yeah,
get to
yeah.
meet.
So I
We'll
can
all have to
check that
go
you've
to
got
the
legs.
we'll all have to go to the East Anglia Storytelling Festival again because that's
Yeah,
a very nice
maybe.
event, isn't it?
Simona, it's at the end of June this year. Maybe you can make it there. I think it's 20 to
Oh,
22
nice.
June. Yeah.
Yes, that's
And
right. It
Sarah
is.
Lloyd. So we're having Sarah Lloyd Wind here next week, Keith, after you.
Ah,
We're going
right.
to interview Sarah, and Marion Oliver has stepped down from managing the East Anglian.
Yeah,
Sarah is taking over now, so she's going to tell us more about it, I'm sure.
yeah. Well, do say
And
hello from me.
absolutely, will do. And yeah, she can tell us stuff about what she's planning. I don't know if they've managed to get the funding they were expecting from. Um, she was writing letters to several organizations trying to get funding for the next East Anglian. Hopefully, some will work.
She's
So we'll
also
know more about it
hosting
next
lots of
week.
events in the area.
Yes.
I've noticed on Facebook that she's hosting like one-off events, which will
Mm-hmm.
build up an audience toward it, I suspect.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to mention, like a comment to your previous line of thought, Keith, that struggling for audiences when it comes to storytelling is a world phenomenon. It's not something specifically happening in the UK or in Greece or in Italy, because, as we said in the previous interview, Simona, there's so many ways of finding entertainment nowadays, that storytelling has to be more than that in order to gain audience. Entertainment, yes, included, of course, but not just that. Yeah, Juliana was absolutely right in her point. So, as we're moving towards the end of the interview, Keith, do you think we might get another story?
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Yay.
And this is one of my favourites, and it's based in Italy. But actually, I made it up. I made it up because when I did assemblies, we had a theme each week, and sometimes I didn't have a story which fitted it, and so I'd make one up. But this one has grown and grown like Topsy. I did it. I made it. I wrote it in the '90s, but it's a story I tell. Uh, it's my default story, if you like. So let us go to Cremona. To Cremona, the town of Cremona, in the final part of the 18th century. So imagine, if you will, a cobbled square, and at the end a magnificent church. And either side there are stone arches, and above the arches are those rooms where merchants ply their trade. And it's early morning, the sun is creeping over the houses, and people are beginning to go about their business, but there is a quiet about the place. A quiet that is broken by the sound of hooves and wooden wheels on the cobbles as a caravan makes its way into the square. A caravan driven by a man in a white t-shirt and red trousers with a red beret. And next to him is a woman with a white blouse and a red skirt and a red bandana. And they stop in the square and they start unloading their wares. Pots and pans and pegs and lucky heather for above your door. And people walk past and they glance and carry on their way until a small boy steps onto a platform at the back of the caravan and he holds a blue violin to his chest and he begins to move the bow back and forth across the strings. And the music swirls around the square and soars into the air. And a crowd gathers to listen to the music. And a man at the back, an instrument maker, is smiling, for it's a long time since he's heard a violin played so beautifully, and by one so young. And of course, as the crowd gathers, they remember they do need a pot, or you can't have too many pegs, and it's a good idea to have some heather above your door for good luck. But above, in an office, is a merchant, with a long robe with a fur collar and a gold chain, and he's working at his ledger with his quill. And he hears the music, and he marches over and slams the window shut and sits down again. Now, a rumour begins to circulate in Cremona, for the people of that town believe that that violin is magic. For whoever heard of a blue violin? And that tiny boy playing it so beautifully, it must be magic. And of course, the people of Cremona love the idea of having a magic violin in their midst. And the rumours spread. Now it is night time, full moon's lighting the square, and it is still. The only sound is the family sleeping in the caravan. But a figure is moving under the arches, a figure dressed in black, no robe this time, no gold chain, and he makes his way across the square and he reaches into the caravan and he takes the violin and the bow. He leaves the square, climbs on his horse, gallops out of the town, then he gallops into the woods, into a clearing, and even though he's in a clearing, as no one is around, as he dismounts, he looks around furtively. And then he takes the violin, as he's seen the boy do, and he begins to draw the bow across the strings. And the sound is horrible. And he's shocked, for he thinks this is a magic violin. He starts moving his fingers on the neck, as he saw the boy do, and the sound is even worse, and he becomes furious. Gritted teeth, heart thumping, anger growing in his face, and he rakes the bow back and forth across the strings, and the sound is hideous. And in his temper, he takes it by the neck, smashes it against the tree, and throws it into the undergrowth. Then climbs back onto his horse, sits for a moment while his heart slows down, and rides back into the town. Early morning the next day, the silence of the square is broken by a small boy crying, by his parents angrily packing away their wares and slamming the shutters on the caravan. A crowd gathers. They are appalled, all voices speaking at once. How could this be? Soon it will be news across northern Italy that Cremona is the kind of place where someone would steal a small boy's violin. But as the crowd spoke, they also parted. For the old man, the instrument maker, was walking forward with a guitar case, a violin case in his hand. The father went to speak, but his wife touched his arm. The old man opened the violin case, and there was a beautiful brand new brown violin, and he handed it to the boy, who held it against his chest and sniffed back a tear. And he drew the bow over the strings, and the music swirled around the square and soared into the air. And the crowd of people cheered and clapped in appreciation and relief. But above the square, a window slammed shut.
What a beautiful story, Keith.
Thank you.
How did you get? What was the theme, or was it
So
like
the theme,
violins and
the
music?
theme was talent. So the talent is the boy has the talent. It's not the violin. So that's where that came from.
Talent is magic, not the instrument.
Yeah, it's my favorite, I have to say, still.
It's a brilliant story, and also like you're setting it in Cremona with the violin. It's so spot on because you could have set it anywhere in the world, but you chose the violin. You chose Cremona, so.
Well, that's it. Yeah, I can remember when I started telling it that Stradivarius lived in Cremona.
Yeah.
So you know already, and also good old Google Images. I was able to get an image of the square in Cremona on my laptop, so I could describe the square.
I was thinking that it is a very good technique to use a place you actually know, the whereabouts, and incorporate it in a story you're making. That's excellent. Good thinking.
I like when I develop a story to have a sense of where it is. So the Perth story that you mentioned, the town where I was brought up is on a crossroads, and it did have a market square, and it did have a May fair when everyone came in. So I set it there so that I have a sense of where the place is. So I do that with quite a lot of stories that I set them somewhere that actually exists, even though it's not about the place necessarily.
No, last Sunday I was at Mike's World Story Round on Zoom, and I shared this story with them. One I heard by Kath Edwards, and it's a classic gothic ghost Christmas story. And it starts and ends at a pub. And when I finished the story, Mike said, "Next time you come, I'm going to take you to that pub because I know exactly which pub you were talking about." So I'm so looking forward to it now because I want to see if it looks like what I have imagined.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, it was a good story. It was a good story.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, Kath is much more masterful than I am. Well, in telling it, I need to practice more, but still, everybody loves a good ghost story, don't we?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, this has been wonderful, Keith. Thank you so much for doing this with us. It's been lovely having you as our muse.
Very, very enjoyable for me too. Nice to see you again, Despina. Meet you again, Simona.
Thank you
Great.
so much for coming and being our muse for this episode.